Hello, everyone. It is Wednesday, the 17th of September, and time for another edition of Wednesday with Walton and Reis here at thecardinalnation.com in video form and in audio form at the Scoops Sports Network and all your favorite podcast apps. Welcome, Kyle Reis.
Hello, sir. How are you?
Doing fine, thank you. Off in a little bit of a vacation abode here, but still able to come and talk Cardinals minor league baseball. We got a lot to cover this week. We got some players of the month for the organization from August. We've got some all-stars in the Florida State League. And of course, we'll playoff baseball in Springfield, TBD. And then we'll also talk about the Cardinals selections to the Arizona Fall League. And that should pretty well cover us, I think, this
Yeah,
episode.
yeah, plenty to talk about.
Exactly. So let's get started then. The Cardinals announced their players and pitcher of the month for August on the 16th. I guess there's no hurry to get it out. Um, and they were a couple of very interesting choices, certainly deserving choices, but not the ones that we picked here at the Cardinal Nation. Joshua Baez is a player of the month, and Luis Gastelum of Springfield also. They're both teammates of Springfield, is the pitcher of the month. And it's a very interesting choice both ways around. Baez ranked in the top 10 in the system in a number of stats. And that's not bad, certainly not bad, but in the top 10 in the system isn't really eye-popping. But I think it was almost like this was an award that took into account everything that Baez did all year, because at the end of the press release, they noted that Baez for the season ranks second in home runs in the system, second in extra base hits, third in RBI, first in stolen bases, and is just the second Cardinals minor leaguer in the last 20 years to have more than 40 extra base hits and 50 stolen bases in a single season. So this is a guy that's really done, everything from power to run production to stolen bases. So whether I say, Joshua Baez had the best month, he didn't, but he certainly has had a tremendous turnaround season, such that, he's vaulted from, falling into the back edge of the top 50 into a top 10-ish prospect in the system, I think.
Yeah, it's funny. It's almost like the Cardinals were waiting for somebody to hit three home runs in three straight games or home run in three straight games, just hoping that somebody would pull ahead from Rainiel and JJ and Baez. But yeah, congratulations to him. It's nice to see him, who has made nothing but solid progress throughout the season, really peak at the end of the year. It does feel like he's just building and building and building and building. Even as on Tuesday night, as Springfield enters the playoffs against the Tulsa Drillers, he's the one who driving in the first run of that game, driving in Chase Davis, who doubled in the first inning of that game. So the Cardinals need offense, right? The St. Louis Cardinals need offense,
And
and
they
it
need and they need outfielders in the pipeline. I mean, if you were to look at any position right now in the system, outfield is the one probably with the biggest question marks. Nathan Church had a nice year and he's moved up, but he's probably a fourth outfielder, fifth outfielder at the major league level. And we talk a lot, we've talked a lot, everybody's talked a lot about the disappointments that Jordan Walker's faced, but there's not somebody else knocking on the door to take his job.
Yeah. Yeah. And nothing in the way of impact, like you're saying. That's really what separates the potential. And again, we've seen the potential fizzle out. But the potential of someone like Josh Baez over like the potential of someone like Nathan Church, or even, granted different position, but even someone like Victor Scott II. There's just with all of Joshua Baez's physical gifts, it's just a whole nother level of baseball potential there. So yeah, and he's a really good outfielder too. He's still kind of clunky out there, but it's all there for him, the potential.
Yeah. Could he play center field in the major leagues, do you think, or is he going to end up being a corner guy?
No, not as currently constructed, but he's still young and they're still moving him around. And if you wanted him to play a similar level to like Lars Nootbaar in center, I don't think that that's unrealistic when Nootbaar plays center, but I would not want him running out there if I was going to be a competitive team. Now, as we talk, and this is way out there, you got to add him to the 40-man roster, and maybe you're looking for a spot for him. Maybe he is a guy that you would run out there in center field in 2026, because there's no reason not to, because your team probably isn't competitive. But something like that. But unless he takes huge steps, he's not an everyday center field.
Well, and first thing first, Baez needs to spend some time at AAA, so he's probably not going to be in the picture in the spring. But he should receive his, an invitation to big league camp, and get the opportunity to dip his toe in the water and for the coaches to see him and put himself on the map for when an opportunity comes during the season.
Absolutely, yeah. It's the time of the future, Brian, and hopefully he ends up taking the steps necessary to be leading that charge based on the promise that we've seen as the 2025 season has progressed. Because it's been one of the highlights of the season in the minor league level.
Luis Gastelum. I have to work on getting that accent on the middle syllable. 23-year-old from Mexico. We've talked a lot about him. His changeup had a 74% whiff rate in two strike situations last month, but he's got his fastball up to nearly 95 as well. Now, Gastelum led the system in saves, led the system in strikeouts, led the system in strikeout to walk ratio. So very, very good month. But his ERA was just under 3, not stellar. But it's clear that the organization is really, really focused on strikeouts and strikeout to walk ratio to the point where Gastelum received the nod over Michael Watson, who his teammate, who only gave up 1 run all month and had very good numbers, but certainly didn't have the strikeout to walk ratio that Gastelum did.
Yeah, this is an interesting one for me, Brian. We spent a little time last week talking about how the bullpen, specifically at Springfield, fed by Peoria and Palm Beach in some cases, has been really good. That's part of the reason why the Springfield Cardinals have been really good. I understand wanting to keep that core together, whoever's healthy, whoever's not run down, whoever has not met inning limits or inning goals, to keep them together. But I don't necessarily understand why Luis Gastelum is still at AA, other than for the playoff push, because this is an arm that you're gonna have to keep. You're gonna need to see a AAA. And I'm sure that's where he'll end, depending on how Springfield's run is. But
yeah, but take that name and pull it out and insert Bryson Motts, or I mean, or Michael Watson,
yeah,
I mean, or Eshawn Henderson. There's
yeah.
all these guys that have been, I wouldn't say clogging up the Springfield roster but they've been pitching exceptionally well for Springfield, starting and relieving. While you're thinking, wait a minute, this is an organization starved for pitching. Why aren't they getting experience at AAA right now? And because the AAA roster has a lot of journeyman types, it isn't as if these guys are all blocked. That's not the case. And with all, of course, with all the starting pitching injuries, I mean, my gosh, Memphis could have used the help.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'll say that for me, the main difference with Gastelum is his changeup is so unique and it's so good, and you also have real immediate bullpen concerns that you need to find out pretty quickly if that changeup can play with the Major League Baseball. And I'm sure that they know it. I'm sure they've modeled it. I'm sure they feel comfortable with it at this point.
And
And
we'll
maybe
probably see it in spring. I mean, not probably. We almost certainly will see it in spring training as well.
yeah, yeah, but that pitch is just so special that it is the kind of pitch that another organization would take a chance on entering, the 2026 season. So I don't think there's any hiding him or anything like that. I just think that, you're talking about relievers. You're talking about watching the minor or the major league teams struggle, even though, like we've talked about, the ERA is good for the Cardinals. The St. Louis Cardinals bullpen is good. It's been great, especially since they moved the 3 arms at the pen. But we also see that that's led mostly by the top end of their bullpen, the back top end, if you want. And those
The top
fillers.
end of the back end of yeah.
Ryan, I'm here to talk about the top end of the back ends. The back ends of the top end. It's look. If I start talking about chickens, Brian, end this
No,
thing right
no, we're
now.
not going back there. We're not going back
But
there this week.
but yeah, the elite arms, the arms you will go to in high leverage. Other than those guys out of the bullpen, it's just been a merry-go-round of trash, really. And then Nick Raquet, who got 1 inning and then was ceremoniously rid of for John King, who we're all tired of as that is. So it just, well, I'm just saying with the bullpen of it all, there's no reason to have this kid just kind of linger around at AA. I would have liked to have seen them push him. Maybe he'll get that for the last week of the season if Springfield
Yeah,
falls.
we'll have to see what happens once Springfield's year's done. And of course, we hope they go a long way. So also news that came out on Tuesday, the Florida State League announced their postseason All-Star team. And really, I don't need to say postseason All-Star team because another one of my pet peeves is that when MLB took over the minor leagues, they abolished all the midseason All-Star games. here in the U.S. So the only All-Stars that they have now are postseason teams. But Palm Beach, even though it was a disappointing year for them, a 500-ish year, missed the playoffs in both halves. Palm Beach had three players on the FSL, and of course, this is low A, Class A, All-Star team. And not surprisingly, Rainiel Rodriguez made the team, although he was the DH, not the catcher. Deniel Ortiz, who they designated at third base, but he also plays first. And Jason Savacool, who was exceptional in the rotation when he was at Palm Beach, 161 ERA, 189 batting average against. All three of those guys, of course, finished the season up with Peoria, but they spent the majority of the season with Palm Beach, and therefore they were named All-Stars. And I think that all are very deserving.
Yeah, they and again they're all their own unique little thing. Savacool, we'll start with him because he's probably the least well known at this point. I know he's the one that we've talked about the least, but he's just kind of a collegiate strike thrower who throws what amounts to every pitch that a pitcher can throw, really. And that that really helped him at Palm Beach. Of course, Deniel Ortiz has kind of been the sleeper prospect in the organization. We've talked about him almost since the minute he started busting out. We really don't need to go into that. It's just when you talk about, for me, what it boils down to is you get the two teenagers who left their mark on the lowest levels of the minors and earned promotions, and who also have thump in their bat, and who are also, at the very least, they're both top 15 prospects in the organization, and that's
And as
incredibly
much
exciting.
and as much excitement as there's been about Rodriguez, I mean, Ortiz's OPS at Palm Beach was only about less than 20 points lower than Rodriguez. So he had an exceptional year, and he had 31 stolen bases on top of it.
Yeah.
So, Ortiz is a guy that has shot up the list, and probably I don't have him ranked aggressively enough. When I go to look again over the winter, I'm going to give him, fair consideration to move him up again.
Yeah, he's done, and that is in part because of some of the success he had at Peoria. His strikeout rate still got kind of high before the Peoria season was over, but he was making progress. And I think one of the things that he kind of put to bed is his athletic ability in the field. I think he'd be an average, with continued growth. He's not an average major leaguer right now, but there's no reason to think he couldn't be an average defender at one of the corners. Somewhere down the line, the progress that he's made based on what he was, according to scouting reports, pre 2024 draft, he's just made an incredible amount of progress. So the name of the game with him is progress, whereas the name of the game with Rainiel Rodriguez has been living up to the hype. And that's what separates the two of them in my book, Brian.
There you go. Now, a week ago Wednesday, right after we, of course, taped, the Cardinals, well, actually, all of baseball announced the Arizona Fall League rosters. And that's a change over what it used to be. It used to be names would trickle out, teams would kind of do it willy-nilly. With MLB in control, they had a coordinated release where all 30 organizations announced their 8 players going to the Arizona Fall League. They don't say when before they announce it, so it was a surprise they announced it on Wednesday, but it's great because last year it was a couple weeks later, and it was like, okay, the Arizona Fall League is going to start in like a week and a half. How about you tell us who's going?
Yeah.
So the 8 players the Cardinals sending, same as in recent years, they send 5 pitchers, 3 position players. And the position players, the 5 organizations that make up each of the teams in the Arizona Fall League get together because they don't need 5 catchers. So, okay, you send a catcher, I'll send a first baseman. You send 2 outfielders, I'll send a short. They decide among themselves. And then on the pitching side, typically there's one player who's designated a starter. 5 teams, 5 organizations join one team, so each team gets a starter. So you have a 5-man rotation. And it looks like Chen Wei Lin is going to be probably the designated starter for the Cardinals. But they're also sending Darlin Saladin, who started quite a bit during the year. And then 3 relievers, Tyler Brott, Randall Clemente, and DJ Carpenter. And none of those guys have spent significant amount of time at Double A. A number of them are there, but they most all arrived fairly recently. And then on the position player side, catcher Grayson Tarlow, outfielder Miguel Ugueto, who came to the organization as a Rule 5 pick and then missed time due to injury this year. And then outfield Travis Honeyman, who of course was a 3rd rounder 2 years ago, but and had a relatively injury-free year this year, but he's been at Peoria. So of those players, certainly Lynn and Honeyman are kind of the standouts, and both of them, I think, are justified selections to the Arizona Fall League because they need more time. And Lynn needs more innings, Honeyman needs more at bats.
Yeah, yeah, this is going to be a really interesting group to follow. Brian, I'm gonna struggle to not just get right into some of the articles you've written over at the Cardinal Nation because I think that they're your recap of who's going and then how you compare them. We'll get to that here in a second to what had happened in the Cleveland organization. But I do think that for me, a couple things that like stick out just as we get into the Arizona Fall League season is one. I would remind everybody that usually the pitching is not of the highest standard. There will be some pitchers there, but it's not elite pitching hardly ever. But there will be high end bats there. So what
To
I'm
that end, I'm sorry, pardon me for interrupting, but
yeah,
to that end, God bless him. I mean, Connor Thomas was the pitcher of the year in the Arizona Fall League just a few years ago. And nothing against Connor Thomas, but he's a marginal 40-man player. And I think he was injured this year. He was with
yeah,
Milwaukee. But
yeah.
anyway, yeah. So point being, you didn't see the Liberators or the McGreevy's, in the Arizona Fall League.
Yeah, and oftentimes to the Connor Thomas of it all, the two types of pitchers that have the most success are the crafty lefties who go off speed heavy and kind of live on the black, and then those righties, quite honestly, quite frankly, who just heat. I do think that what we'll see, and I've been trying to figure it out why they might have chose some of these arms, but I think back to last year, and I don't have this substantiated, but I think back to last year with like Matt Svanson, right? Matt Svanson started working in a cutter, and part of the AFL assignment was, hey, get this cutter figured out against, high end minor league bats. And that's kind of propelled him, along with some mechanical changes, to being a really great 2025 relief pitcher for the St. Louis Cardinals. So my guess would be that while I'm a big fan of Randall Clement, and I do think that there's a potential for a major league future there, I think that, and also Ty Bratt's got a big fastball and a big arm, Brat rather. I think that you'll see some of these guys start to fool with other pitches. Shenhui Len, I think about him. I hate watching him pitch, but he has some really dynamic stuff. And my guess would be they'll try to see how effective he is without his splitter because it's a splitter driven repertoire. If his splitter is working, a split changeup, if that thing's working, then the rest of his stuff works really well. But if it's not, then he has no command of anything and nothing plays off of it. So I'm anxious to see how they play with that. I think that the Arizona Fall League, while I for years have been critical, and you talk about it in your article, but like of the finishing school for prospects, I've been critical of that. I think that that's completely inaccurate, and I think it paints a false picture of exactly the talent level. I do think what this is it's a testing ground for prospects, and at least in how the Cardinals will move forward.
And that's not necessarily bad. What Kyle was referring to is I got to thinking about this and these selections that the Cardinals sent this year. I mean, and I used MLB Pipeline's rankings because I can compare them across organizations. I can compare them across multiple years very, very easily. In fact, anybody can access them. You can access them as well. Anybody listening to this or watching this. But the idea that the Cardinals only sent one top 30 prospect to the Arizona Fall League is very, very foreign to me. I mean, just in 2022, the Cardinals sent four top 30 players and big names: Walker, Wynn, Tink Hence. The next year, Scott, Crooks, Jerpy, Grino. These are guys that all have been very, very successful. Most of them in the major leagues already. And then even last year, Sajasi, after he'd already debuted with St. Louis, they sent Leonardo Bernal, they sent Bryson Motts, they sent Eshawn Anderson, they sent Swanson, like you said, Nathan Church. So these guys are guys that were, very close to the major leagues. And this year it's very, very different. And as you said, it's a different thought process. There are different people in charge. That last year the Arizona Fall League was already well underway, probably already done by the time that the new hiring started in place from Rob Serfolio on down. And of course, Larry Day, the new farm director. And so I decided I'd go back and look at what Cleveland had done over the last few years because both Serfolio and Larry Day came from Cleveland. And sure enough, the Guardians classes and I only went back to 2022, but I looked at the Guardians AFL classes from 2022, 2023, 2024. And every year they sent one guy from their top 30. That's it. And the other guys most of them were guys I'd never heard of. And whereas the Cardinals, the last 3 years of the players the Cardinals sent to the AFL, they sent 24 players. 12 of them, half of the players the Cardinals sent to the AFL have already reached Major League Baseball. Half of them. That's pretty darn good. Now, you compare that to Cleveland. They only sent one top 30 guy each of the last 3 years, and they've only had six guys from those 24 players that they sent to the Fall League reach the majors. So it's a different philosophy. They're not sending their best guys. Maybe they're sending them home to work on things. Maybe they're having them rest up. Maybe they're going to send them to winter ball overseas, although probably not. But it's interesting. I haven't had the chance to really talk to anybody about this, but this is a theory I came up with that you can go to the Cardinal Nation if you subscribe, or if you don't, please consider subscribing. And you can read, I broke down all the detail, I researched all the players, where they stand, and it's clear that the Cardinals are looking at the AFL differently this year than they did in the past.
Yeah, and even as I was reading through the article that you put together, Brian, I was doing some research on the names and like the other interesting thing that Cleveland did, and maybe we'll see it as we move down the line a little bit, but it seems like all of the players that ended up making a major league debut, not all of them, like half of them came from other organizations or were players that they found in kind of an interesting situation. Like Cade Smith in particular, right? Cade Smith is interesting. He's a dynamite piece for the Cleveland bullpen.
Great relief, great guy out of their bullpen, very successful. He was there in 2022.
Exactly. And so what his story is fascinating too. He was drafted in the 17th round by the Twins in 2017 and then did not sign and then went undrafted coming out of college. And they picked him up, turned him into a bullpen arm. David Fry, drafted by the Brewers, traded for the Brewers. There was somebody else who was traded. Also, two of their players that have made the major league are Canadians. Oh Canada, our home and native land. Tyler O'Neill, we pray to you. I think that's how that goes. But
Stubby
so
clap.
Stubby, sorry, Stubby. My apologies. I do not hate you the same way I hate Ryan Ludus. But so no, like that's they've. I think that a lot of times when I'm looking through that list, what the Guardians will do is they will put their newly acquired players into the fall league, and I think that's something that we will also see with the Cardinals. I do think this is a little bit different. This being the first year, a lot of guys transitioning in roles. Darlin Saladin transitioning from a starter to a reliever role. Ty Brott switching, transitioning kind of from a starter to a reliever role, getting more reliever innings. Like it seems like they've been very purposeful, at least about the arms that they're bringing along.
And it's interesting. The Cardinals, the only example I can think of the Cardinals in recent years who did that was when, after the big trades at the deadline in 2023, they did send Roby to the Fall League. But again, remember when Roby came to the Cardinals in that trade with Texas, he was injured. And so Roby didn't get his innings that year. So that was that's a big reason why the Cardinals traditionally have sent guys there, and that is to get more reps. And I think that's why Lynn is there, probably given he missed, I think, 2 months of this last year. But the Cardinals haven't done that a lot, and they haven't sent guys that they've required. And but like you said, maybe that's something that they'll start to do once they start bringing in more guys in the Bloom regime.
Brian, was there anything else as you were writing that article that kind of stuck out to you? I would say, for me, I guess the only other thing is there. It didn't really seem like there was a lot of consistency with like where else they were picking. Like I was trying to find the pattern and I
The
couldn't.
other the other thing that I noticed was the average experience level of the player. As I said, five of the eight players that the Cardinals are sending to the AFL this year are guys that spent most of the season in Peoria, the vast majority of the season in Peoria. So there aren't the guys who are in AAA like Sajasi or ones who have reached the majors. These are all guys that are very, very green in experience. And again, that's not necessarily a bad thing considering the quality pitching that's there.
Yeah, I'm excited about Honeyman. This I think to kind of illustrate the point that you're making, this is a really good opportunity for Travis Honeyman because it gives him a chance to face off against talent he might not be ready for, but also to show that he's ready for. But without the pressure of in-season struggle, right? This is a little cherry on the top for his season. And we know he missed time even this year. He's missed time in the past. Gives him a chance to build up some extra at bats, see how he wears as the season goes on. But
And I
yeah,
think that's really important too, because, again, I think of sort of like we talk about Motts and Hansen on the pitching side kind of being the same. I think of Honeyman and Levinson because they were drafted together in the same class. And Levinson, of course, has stayed healthy, and he's the guy that moved up to Springfield while Honeyman stayed in Peoria. And it was like, oh, that's not so great. But now Honeyman gets a chance to play another, probably 20 games or so. I don't know that he'll be the designated position player for the Cardinals, but I would guess that's the case. And what that means, by the way, just a quick digression. Every organization names a starting pitcher, like I talked about. They also designate what's called a priority player. And that means that player is guaranteed starting time. I think they start like 3 out of 4 games or something like that. So every organization gets one guy who gets priority in terms of playing time. And the others, of course, are, they may play, 3 days a week, and relievers might throw just once a week, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and that also explains why the other two position players that they're sending are kind of organizational depth types, because you don't want, I mean, sure, it's a great learning experience, but like, what do you really get from sending Dakota Harris to that? Or, it gives you a chance to give these guys just a little extra with Grayson Tarlow and Miguel Uguedo.
Well,
So
I got to admit, I'd like to see Joshua Baez there. I'd really
yeah,
like to see Joshua Baez. I'd like to see Chase Davis there if Chase Davis is ready. There are a lot of guys that I would rather have sent to the fall league, but the organization has their reasons for doing what they're doing. And like I said, one of the things on my to-do list is to try to get more inside their thinking in terms of why they did what they did. I've drawn the parallel to Cleveland, but I don't really know why Cleveland did it the way they did it.
yeah, yeah. Hopefully we can find out, Brian. That'll be some good reason other than the reasons that are already there to stay tuned to the Cardinal Nation.
Yeah, so the again, we're of course going to follow Springfield in the playoffs, but once that's done, then Memphis will have another week, and then there'll be a short time off. But the Arizona Fall League gets underway on the 6th of October, and the Cardinals players are on what's called the Glendale Desert Dogs, and they'll typically play 6 days a week, and we'll be, of course, reporting on those games every day, and I'll get down there probably the end of October or so to spend some time down there and watch the players and talk to coaches. The Cardinals are sending, the other thing the organizations do is the Cardinals send a coach, and they're sending Elvis Rodriguez, who is the hitting coach at Peoria, down to the Fall League this year. So um, that's what's going to go on.
Yeah, no, again, another name to keep an eye on. It seems like whenever they do send a coach to the Arizona Fall League, it's a cap tip for great work throughout the year. So it sometimes can be an indicator of how, and I don't know how it is now. Again, it's a different regime, but it might be an indicator of a rising, highly thought of coach in the
And
organization.
that's an interesting point, Kyle. And I know in some of the discussions at the Cardinal Nation message board and probably on social media as well, the offensive struggles that they've had at Peoria in recent years. I have at least one prominent member of our community who is convinced that somehow the coaches in Peoria are substandard. And I try to explain, listen, there's rovers, there's coordinators, there's more people than there ever was. Even if there was some bad coaches, they would be surrounded by enough other coaches that they would fix that. So Peoria's hitting coach going to the Arizona Fall League, a clear positive recognition would tend to blow up that idea that somehow Peoria's offensive problems are because of the hitting coaching.
Yeah, and granted, it's not the specialized coaches, but like Patrick Anderson has been at Peoria for the last 2 or 3 years, and now he's at Springfield. He's their coach. You
And
know,
by the way, Springfield has won a record number of wins, won both halves of the season. The most successful. Well, we'll see if they win the championship, it'll be the most successful season in their history.
yeah. I'm not going to say that I've had a lot of conversations, but I have talked to a couple people that have played at that field and in the Midwest League, and they do not rave about it. They like it.
Not easy.
Exactly. And the dimensions in a lot of those parks are deceptive. In Peoria, the Dozer Park, that thing is like 310 down the lines, but it gets weird as you go to the gaps in dead center, and the ball does not fly, the wind does not blow, and if it does, it's blowing in. It's not a hitter environment. It is a difficult environment to hit. Like even going to South Bend at the high A level, like That it's not a good hitting environment exactly.
Yeah. And it's the first time for many of these players away from the cocoon of Palm Beach and
Yeah.
Jupiter, where they are first in the Florida Complex League in the backfields, and then they play for Palm Beach, and it's a very familiar, comfortable environment. The weather is hot in the summer, but still, it's nothing like playing in the upper Midwest in April when it's cold and wet and damp and ugly. So I'm not making excuses for players, but it's that step up to high A for some is not as easy as other
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
a number of reasons.
And the travel's different. I mean, there's a whole bunch of reasons why. I mean, it's just different before you get to take the step to double A, where things start to normalize out a little bit.
All right, so I think with that we'll probably close our edition for this week. Again, follow the Springfield Cardinals in the playoffs. Watch Memphis in their final weeks of the year as they as I mentioned before. I think the reason Memphis plays latest, AAA plays latest, is because of course they're feeding players to the major leagues when there's injuries and needs, and those players need to be available. And then some of these Springfield players may get a chance to move up to Memphis just to once Springfield's done, just to keep playing to sort of get ready for the fall league. Don't know that for a fact, but have seen that in the past as well.
Another thing to keep an eye on is we change regimes.
Exactly. We're kind of getting through this, for the first time, with this new organization. The other thing, of course, we'll be watching very closely that'll start to come to light, I'm sure, in October. Some more of the personnel changes may start to trickle out. From the top down, from Mozeliak down, there's a lot of contracts that are going to expire, and there's going to be a lot of changes, just as there were last year. Probably, I would guess more change this year, if I had to guess, coming than there was even last year. So there'll be new names to learn and new backgrounds, and to try to figure out how this all fits together as Chaim Bloom, steps out of the shadows and talks on the record, for the first time. And it'll be very interesting to hear what he has to say regarding setting expectations with the fan base.
Oh, great point. And also, probably new fun titles for jobs, which will be something that I'm sure I will be highly cynical and skeptical of as they come out. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah, and if you were following social media, Kyle was kind enough to send me the link last week. The Cardinals actually advertised for the position, basically Chaim Bloom's assistant, I guess is the term, no better term than that. And it looked like a very exciting job. I'm sure there's some very interesting applicants for that position.
I filled one out for you, Brian.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. And thanks, Kyle. I appreciate that. I think I'm at the stage of life where I'm probably past the entry level position, but it would be very flattering, I'm sure.
I'll let you know when your interview's scheduled.
All right, sounds good. And for everybody, thank you for watching and listening again. And of course, we'll be back on the 24th, and there'll be lots of news, things we hadn't anticipated will come up, I'm sure, and give us another 30 minutes or so to talk about and share with you as we do each week. Kyle, thank you for your insight as always.
Thank you, Brian. It's always a pleasure.
All right, see you next time.